Hello, my name's Gavin, this is Genre Books, and this is week 16 of the Read What You Own challenge, a marathon of misery and self-denial where I will not buy any new books until I have read 100 books from these here shelves. Fantasy in February has been good to me because I have stuck as much as I can to my idea of reading thin fantasy. It was helpful that the latest pick from my tote bag of mild peril was serendipitously heroic fantasy, aka sword and sorcery. This gave me the excuse or the obligation to read a lot of short books. I was quite happy with that. And I was halfway through this book or partway through this book. No, or I hadn't even started this book last time I recorded one of these videos, but on the Sunday, which I did record it, I read Gardner F. Fox's Thief of Larn. This was the last book of the Wasted Weekend as well, and the second Gardner F. Fox book I had read that weekend. This is a sequel to Warrior of Larn, which I read 2-3 years ago, and doesn't quite scale the heights of Warrior of Larn, but it is enjoyable nonetheless. I then spent the best part of the rest of the week immersing myself in anthologies of sword and sorcery short stories, the first of which was Savage Heroes, edited by Eric Pendragon. His name wasn't really Eric Pendragon, it was Mike Parry, but Eric Pendragon. And illustrated by Jim Pitts, example of his style. And also this one was autographed by Jim Pitts. But there are stories here from luminaries of sword and sorcery, and I did a whole video on sword and sorcery yesterday if you want to watch that. But stories here by C.L. Moore, Henry Kuttner, Clark Ashton Smith, Carl Edward Wagner, Daphne Castell, David A. Drake, Clifford Ball, and Robert E. Howard. The Robert E. Howard story wasn't a finished article at the time of his death, and there were additions made to that story by Richard L. Tierney. There are some great stories here. There's that Cull story from Robert E. Howard. There's a Jirel of Joiry story from C.L. Moore. A Tale of Necromancers from Clark Ashton Smith. Almost all of these hit the spot. There was one or two not quite stellar, but on the whole, this was a lot of fun. I am probably going to be using the phrase "a lot of fun" again in this video, because essentially reading all of these old sword and sorcery anthologies has been a hoot. The next two I'll take together. Flashing Swords. So Flashing Swords 1 and Flashing Swords 2, edited by Lynn Carter. Now, I've read 2-3 Lynn Carter books last week, and more than these two anthologies, I think, edited by Lynn Carter. And this isn't even the last Lynn Carter you'll see in this video. I think I'm going to have to do a video about Lynn Carter at some point. But these two books represent the first collections of stories written specifically for these anthologies and under the auspices of the Sword and Sorcery Guild of America. This seems to be basically a drinking club that Lynn Carter and some friends came up with. A very low key, low drama guild where they could just enjoy themselves and talk about sword and sorcery. I'll take both books in one go and tell you that there are stories here from Fritz Leiber, Jack Vance, Paul Anderson, Lynn Carter, L. Sprague de Camp, Michael Moorcock, Andre Norton and John Jakes. And I'm not sure that there is a Duff one here. I was a little bit worried about the Lynn Carter one in the first few pages, but the action really picked up and it ended up being quite enjoyable. But we have Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. We have a Dying Earth story. The Paul Anderson one is like a Viking fantasy adaptation about some mer people. The L. Sprague de Camp story is some sort of arabesque Zaragothan alternate history with bullfighting and flying carpets. The Michael Moorcock story is an Elric story. And not only Elric, but another one of the aspects of the Eternal Champion makes a brief cameo. The Toads of Grimmerdale lays on the horror magic, quite thick but very enjoyable, and that's part of the Witch World series, or in the Witch World universe. And the John Jakes tale is a Brack the Barbarian story. I really like these anthologies, if for no other reason than you don't find these stories elsewhere. They are written specifically for the collection. And it is a bit of a who's who for, certainly for sword and sorcery, but for fantasy in general. The final book I read finished this week was The Magic of Atlantis from Lynn Carter from 1970. Another Lynn Carter edited anthology with a groovy as hell cover from Lancer Books. It's in pretty good nick as well. It's got lovely sprayed edges in purple and not stories written specifically for the anthology this time, but culled mainly from the pages of Weird Tales, which is no bad thing. So this is a little bit sword and sorcery and 100% in my Project Rabbit Hole series, the first of the Atlantis books I will be reading this year. So stories here from Robert E. Howard again, Henry Kuttner again, L. Sprague de Camp, Lynn Carter, Edmund Hamilton, Clark Ashton Smith and Nixin Dialis. No idea if I'm pronouncing that right. You tell me. In some of these stories, Atlantis is just the backdrop for swashbuckling and adventure. In other of the stories, the fate of Atlantis is the main subject. I think, again, without exception, all of these were enjoyable. Even the Lynn Carter. The last book for this video, hopefully not the last book for this week. I still have the rest of today, but I haven't quite finished it. There are 30 pages left in The Pastel City by M. John Harrison. 1971, New English Library. Brilliant cover for this, which I'm not going to crack the spine in showing to you. My first introduction to the Viriconium series, my first introduction to M. John Harrison. If I'm honest, this is really good so far. It's difficult to call it epic when it's 150 pages, but it does pack a lot in to those pages. However, I haven't finished the book yet, so it doesn't go on my list. The list 70 books now out of the 100. The end is in sight, and good, because it needs to be. I need to try to keep this tempo up. It's going to be difficult. Lots of thin fantasy in February. I will continue to read some of these shorter fantasy books in March because I didn't get around to all the ones I wanted to, and it's a really fun way to get through this 100 books at a bit of a clip. Choosing heroic fantasy from the tote bag of mild peril for February really helped. It didn't help me when I picked my new one out. I'm really excited to read these books, but they are really not going to help me get to 100 books anytime soon. I have been meaning to read these for some time, and I now am mandated to. So, Hyperion, The Fall of Hyperion, and the Endymion Omnibus, about 2,000 pages of science fiction, as opposed to really brisk fantasy. I do have some other chunkier books to read during March, both of which are body reads, so I'm definitely going to read them. I'm just going to have to find some shorter books to fit in around them in order to get to the 100 within the next month and a little bit. It's crunch time for the Read What You Own challenge. It is possible I will now fail the Read What You Own challenge if I don't get these books read within a certain amount of time. So, if anyone's got any suggestions for some utter pamphlets that I might have here that I've forgotten about, let me know. Until next time, bye.